Instead, our topic for today could be a different one. And as always, I'm accompanied by Kinky Kong.
Hi Felix. How are you
Hello.
doing?
I'm good. So, welcome back. We have a few topics today to cover. I think the most important might be the partners or friends forever topic. After all, recently there has been a big debate in the French community, and I think there is an ongoing debate in the overall community for years, since the partner ability is on the market, so to say, at least from what I heard. We in Darmstadt were always very happy with the partner mechanic. We played a lot of, or almost all, partner combinations in various ways. And yeah, these days it seems more people have fallen for it.
Which
Some,
is a shame that they're doing it so late because there was a lot more fun stuff legal 2 years ago than there is now.
that's correct. So to pick up on that one, I've said that a couple of times already. Back in the days, when the very first partner cycle was printed, there was a rule of thumb with some exceptions, but the rule was something like if you play partners, you sacrifice value for card advantage. And the exceptions were cards like Thrasios and Vile Smasher and maybe Brews, so the very powerful partners, which were obviously not designed for, at least Vile Smasher was not designed for Duel Commander or 1v1 format. So if you have an average, or if you had an average partner deck like, let's say, Tymna Rayhan and stuff, the commander quality was quite average compared to the single commanders, which were much powerful back in the days, or still are, and therefore you had one more card in your command zone. These days, the card advantage is not that relevant anymore. I've always said it was never that relevant. Back in the days, there wasn't that much power creep, and the overall
Card quality was a bit worse.
yeah, the card quality was worse, but also games are decided much earlier these days, in my opinion, because yeah, that's mainly due to the power creep. Cards like Ragavan, Oko, whatsoever are printed, and they just come with a much cheaper cost compared to what an Oko would have looked like 5 years ago, right? Would have cost like 5 or 6 mana probably, and Ragavan might have been 2 mana creature or whatsoever.
Or even
So,
3.
or maybe even 3, correct? Probably with higher stats, but whatever. So these days, the card advantage aspect isn't that relevant anymore, as I said. But I think partners are still great, and I think we've covered that in our November podcast or the one before, maybe. That usually the Tavish decks, for example, they offered some combination for colors that were usually not covered by single card commanders, simply because they were either the commanders were too bad, or there was just no commander that would fit for competitive playstyle. So that was always an upside for the partners to have a higher variation in terms of brewing and also in terms of color combination, to be able to play 4 color decks that are not forced to be streamlined. Okay, maybe cards like Atraxar are not necessarily streamlined, but if you look at Heaters, for example, it needs to be a special deck, or at least I would say so, since you might want to do something around Cascade, like we did with the Living End deck, for example, or I've seen some Storm decks in the past whatsoever, but it's not the commander for usual mid-range or control deck.
Absolutely. I think the last couple of events have been a good show of this, of rats starting to realize some of the current more powerful partner combinations with Leave Your Calm, Leave Your Malcolm, and Malcolm and Crown. They all are in color combinations where there are no stellar, so like really good commanders for that. There's no really good blue-white commander, there's no really good Jeskai commander, and there's no really good blue-red commander. And they're all really strong color combinations, so any any deck that can chuck at least somewhat capable commanders at the helm of those colors, especially with the additions of Modern Horizons 2, can perform, and as we are seeing, does perform. So that kind of raises the question of, do we need further partner nerfs? Do we need a total ban on the mechanic itself? Do we need just a couple more commanders taken out until we're literally at the stage where probably more than half of the commanders that are legal are banned, partners, not commanders. And now we see another interesting conundrum coming up for the Rules Committee with the Friends Forever being printed. For those that don't know, I think there's been a lot of talk about them. It's basically they're a group of 7 cards that partner with each other, and there's some really good cards in those 7. And
in comparison to the current partners available in Duel
in
Commander.
comparison to the current partners, and they're definitely stronger than the current power level of partners.
Right.
But from experience with Ragavan, we know that the current Duel Commander Committee's position on cards that are really powerful being printed is that they're going to stay legal. There's no emergency bans. And there's no preemptive bans. They will be played in tournaments until the next ban wave comes around.
Let's say it very clearly. We expect it to be like that since,
Well,
as
true.
you said,
They do change their mind a lot. So if they do change their mind, we could see a preemptive ban. In my opinion, those decks are cool and I like to play them, but they're definitely higher than the current power level of the format.
Absolutely, yes. I would
And
not
yeah,
really look forward to, especially if I think about. I mean, we're having our event in February in Germany, and some people might say, yeah, okay, you have like the 60-player event or whatsoever, but we have only 2 of those events a year, so for us it's a bit more. It's more rare, so we value those events much more. Then there is the next Master in this time frame, which is held in mid of March, I guess, and then there's another Prague event also in March. So those are all major events, and I mean there are a couple of other French events as well, big events. And I think they would kind of suffer from a metagame that would mostly warp around France Forever, some combinations. I mean, players would invest some time to find the best decks. We've talked about this prior to the podcast. For example, with Villain 11, you can choose to play a normal control deck like you once did with Timna and Chrome. You can go for an artifact way. You can go for a combo way with a breach combo deck and whatsoever. So there's a little variation to that, and that's fine. But it's a bit unfortunate that these, question is who to blame. Wizards is printing the cards at the wrong time, it seems. Could also say, I think no one would disagree on banning those cards without having any results, simply because they are obviously much stronger than the cards that are available right now. And I think many players would have wished the same result for Ragavan, because it was kind of crashing a big event as well. It was the Master Zap last year, I guess, in summer.
And the Prague event that came before it,
right?
that we played it.
Exactly. It was like, I mean, there were like 80 players or something, and 25% are playing Red Egg wins with the monkey. That's a bit annoying. And yeah, I mean, it was just obvious. Ragavan was a better Zergo. Zergo is a commander that's already on the ban list. So why would you keep it online for 2 months? So that's definitely problematic, and I'm curious how the committee will solve this if we are really entering 2 months of playing Friends Forever. Could need a long breath for that one.
Yep. And I mean, one thing that we see with Modern Horizons 2, and that we will likely continue to see with the current state of the format, is that the ban list has been formed in a way that the cards that are coming out, or many of the cards that are coming out, no, many is an overstatement, some of the cards that are coming out are printed too strong for the current format. And that is something that does necessitate bans and will necessitate bans in the future. And there might need to be, or there should be, some revision on the policy of no preemptive bans, in my opinion, because there are cards are being printed that are likely too strong for the format. Yeah. And it's pretty easy to see that, like with the example of Ragavan or the Prince Forever, just based off the cards are there, and there are worse cards on the ban list, therefore they should likely also be on the ban list, or the other cards should be unbanned. Either or suits me. I like a more powerful format, but I think a decision needs to go either way. Either we ban the strong cards or we don't ban the strong cards.
Yep. I mean, we've kind of experienced a bad example with Jeweled Lotus. Fortunately, this card was printed during a time at which there weren't any paper events, because it was during the first wave of the pandemic. So there were a lot of online events happening. But still, this card was obviously way too powerful. And they just waited until the next ban announcement. And yeah, I mean, I don't understand why being so stubborn on sticking to this pattern. Because Magic is changing, everything is changing, and in some cases you might have to adapt and be more flexible on your takes. So I really hope that in this case they can somehow satisfy, if you want to if you want to say so, the majority of the community by finding a nice solution for the partner issue. If that's an issue, that's a question of perspective.
I think our hot prediction is that yes, it is an issue. We'll see how it plays out. However, I'm fairly confident that yeah, it's probably not good to have cards that are stronger than most of the partners that are actually banned, and let them be played in a format where, well, let them be played at big tournaments where people go and they put some money on the line, and there's some money to be won. And I think being cheated out of that through like a secret layer of all things, where if you don't pre-order the secret layer months ahead, you may even pay really high prices for the cards or not receive them on time. I think it's all a bit weird.
Yep. So weird times are upcoming. Let's see. Maybe we can make the best out of it. I think we can. Fortunately, there are a lot of single card commanders. They're on the rise. You've seen that on a video on a match. In a match I've played with Samuel, a commander called Grazilax, which offers a blue temporish playstyle. And yeah, that slides us into a topic I wanted to talk about since I play this deck, that I think currently many players underestimate the power of Sviloon being a very good swap commander for mono blue decks against aggressive strategies. And yeah, I think that's something that needs to be said. So not only from a perspective of playing those decks, but also playing against these decks. That until now, I think the first deck that came in mind when we talked about the swap rule being relevant for Duel Commander, it was always White Weenie. That's why people used to call it Toolbox. You have a couple of options against control decks, against creature-based decks, even against lands with the card of which I forgot the name.
Tomic?
Tomic, correct. Which is probably relevant as well against Gitrock, for example, which got a lot of popularity again recently. And yeah, so we kind of limited it to White Weenie. And nowadays, I think there are more and more blue decks that are able to compete, like Octavia, Venzer has been reaching top 8s here and there all over again, and also Grazilax now. Might not be that popular in France or Prague yet, but the Philippines picked up on it some time ago, and we here in Germany started playing it as well. So it's just something to keep in mind when you face a blue deck that's not the main commander anymore you face. There might be a Sviloon swap on game 2 or game 3 again, or as well. I think that's quite relevant. Overall, we talked about the card in the last podcast as well, that it's quite powerful, and I tend to include it into almost any mid-range hero control-ish X color deck. I think it's quite a good card.
Definitely. I like Sviloon a lot.
Yeah.
Having 4 toughness is a powerful thing in the format.
Absolutely. And another fun thing is that I think in December there was also a Philippines event with a questing beast going for the first place. It was like a 40 or 50 player event. That was quite unexpected to have a questing beast winning this event, but I think it makes perfectly sense since there are a lot of Aminato players, and in this way it's a nice way of metagaming against that. to have a creature that deals both damage to you and your planeswalker.
Especially since it limits your playstyle a lot more because it has haste and the opponent has to be constantly aware of it being castable
Right.
out of the command zone. And if your opponent passes your control opponent passes the turn with mana up, you don't have to play Questing Beast. You can play other cards from your hand and just wait for a turn that you can either double spell a Questing Beast into play or make them deal with what's on the board and then still have mana to kill your Questing Beast or counter your Questing Beast as it comes down, which can be really taxing for those lower card advantage control decks that are around currently.
Mm-hmm. That's right, yeah.
And another deck that caught our eye, which won a 54-player event,
It's super cool.
is Thruster Tempest's Roar, which is a dinosaur that I actually bought for the Sliver Cascade deck that puts creatures from the hand onto the battlefield to swing for as much trample haste damage
That's not the
flying
correct. That's
as
not the
possible.
correct branding. Hasty Hypergenesis, it's called.
Yes, hasty hypergenesis.
Yeah.
And it didn't make the cut in that deck in the end, but it's an interesting deck to see a list for and perform so well at a big tournament. For those that don't really know what the game plan of the deck would be to get it into play, just cast 4 spells before you try to cast it, which is very doable. You can play around counter magic by having 4 mana and then casting a bunch of 0 mana spells like Walking Ballista or more obscure slots that this list plays like Shifting Wall or Shield Sphere, and you essentially if you cast 5 spells, it counts itself and it'll reduce the command attacks of the next cast. You cast it twice in one turn if it gets counted the first time, and then you have a 7/7 trample haste hexproof for that turn, and in the remaining turns you can protect it with cards like Not of This World, Snakeskin Veil, all that good stuff. So I think with an adequate draw, if you get a bit lucky, you can do cool things with this deck. Definitely a risky deck to play. It goes in that combo area or the kind of similar to Dargo, where you play a lot of slots that are all in on your commander being cast. And for example, if a Drannith is played against this card, you you can go to the next game. You can
Yeah.
just scoop. I don't think there might be some, but there is very few answers to that, and your deck is a pile of trash 0 mana cards. So if you so there's a couple of stonewalls to this deck, like Meddling Mage or Drannith or something like that. But I think it's an interesting pile.
Absolutely. I mean, you could also just counter the commander once, and since you have to follow a very all-in-ish style, at that point you've probably already casted like 3 or 4 spells of your hand, and getting back your cards isn't that too easy in mono green. So a simple counter spell might seal the deal already.
As I was trying to, maybe I didn't preface that well enough, but as I was trying to say, if you have a dork turn 1 and you don't play your commander turn 2, you play him turn 3, you can play him twice in one turn.
Oh, correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So a simple counter spell, just like it doesn't quite do the job against Dargo,
Correct.
if the
Correct.
Dargo player plays around it, probably doesn't quite do the job against Thruster either.
Maybe in this case it's even better, because for Dago it's sometimes a bit difficult to get another sacrifice trigger on something, like sacrificing a creature or an artifact. And
Yep.
here it's just Thruster is the spell, like it pays its tax on its own.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I mean this is a good example for decks that, like, let's say there is a commander like that offers some interesting brew, and you really have only one shot usually with these lists, because those decks benefit a lot from your opponent not really knowing what you're into. And this information is most often already given away on game 1. If you win it, like in the best case you win game 1, and then the second game your opponent might be able to adapt to that. I think it was a similar experience when playing Genesis Storm with Tymna and Thrasios back in the days against people, with a small upside of people expecting you to play Alluran instead, because that was the most common deck for that partner combination. Yeah, but once your opponent knows what's up, they can prepare for it, depending on their game plan, obviously. So
Then again, it is difficult to prepare for a 7/7 trample haster that has hexproof on the turn that it comes into play.
That's correct, but I'm more talking about maybe you can prepare in some ways, like maybe you can take better mulligans, like if
Of course, yes.
if you see
yes.
like
To have a removal spell for the creature.
for example that, or maybe a bounce spell, or let's say you're the red deck wins player and you're on the play and you say, okay, this hand is definitely not fast enough against the dinosaur, so let's go down and try to speed up the process. And that's usually why players, after they were successful with such decks, they wouldn't bring this deck to a tournament a second time unless it's a fun event, because now we've all seen it, we've seen the game plan, and it's a completely different setup if you already know in game one what to expect from that deck. Okay, is there anything else?
I think we've gone through our list, and yeah, it's quite a long talk about partners and the Friends Forever mechanic. But I think it's important when you engage in those discussions to think about and be aware of what you're saying and what it implies for the greater format, like banning a whole mechanic like partner, or making rules changes, or preemptively banning. It's good to be able to extrapolate what kind of precedent that would set and what that would mean for the rest of the format and for the future of the format. To have those thoughts are productive for everyone who takes part in those discussions and who plays Duel Commander overall. So I hope we've maybe illuminated some
minds
to broaden their horizons in what they think about the mechanic.
Yeah, let's hope for the best, but as most often, I'm optimistic about it. And well, what's the worst we can expect? Having just problematic cards banned and entering 2 months of playing Friends. If we're just talking about the current metagame, although your approach was an overall approach right now.
Yes.
Like what you've just said was more like a general statement.
True.
Yeah.
But it's good to keep in mind that the Duel Commander Committee has said in the past that they don't want to do preemptive bans, and that takes into consideration, or that took powerful cards being printed back then into consideration, and it might be good to ask them to reevaluate what they think about it now, because more powerful cards are being printed now than they were in the past.
Correct.
Or than there were in the past. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely not less to maintain in the future, right? There will be more questions to answer and more problems to solve. So let's see how we are handling it, how they are handling it. What can I say? It will be interesting.
It definitely will be.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Very much for listening. And I wish you, and I think Samuel will wish you a great day as well.
Yes.
Then
you can reach us in our Discord. We always talk about things there. And,
definitely. You can join. You can also, if you have any questions, put them down in the comments. You can ask us on Discord, on Facebook, wherever you like to contact us.
Feel free to like and subscribe. That always helps us out.
Definitely. To spread the word.
Spread the word as well. Yes, I think we're getting there, but I think it's good to have some places where that have a little bit of a larger voice to present what they feel about the format, and I think we do an okay job of that, and I think it's good if more people know about us.
Right. With that being said, have a good one and see you next time.
See you next time.